In the name of God, most merciful and compassionate. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference as held on the Nahjul Balagha for having given me this valuable opportunity to give my own lecture under the title, Towards Writing a Comprehensive Topical Commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha, the Path to Eloquence. In order to interact with the honorable audience, as I have been introduced, I am Karim Aghili. I have been teaching the Nahjul Balagha at the Manchester Islamic Center for over 2 years. My interest in the Nahjul Balagha goes back to my early youth, and from then onwards, the Nahjul Balagha has become an integral and inseparable part of my intellectual life and worldview. The Nahjul Balagha is really an inexhaustible treasure. It consists of a wide spectrum of various topics, such topics as philosophy, metaphysics, theology, and so on. Unfortunately, the Nahjul Balagha has suffered double injustice. The injustice is caused by the enemies of this work, because they try to conceal the merits of this book out of jealousy. Because if the merits of this book come to light, its light will eclipse their own. The second justice is caused by those who focus just on certain topics of the Nahjul Balagha, ignoring the other topics. There are two reasons for this second injustice. The first one is because of lack of true appreciation of the thought system in total, as a whole. And the second reason is because if the illuminative knowledge as contained within Nahjul Balagha comes to light, the shift in perception and mass consciousness will change the status quo. That is why Nahjul Balagha has suffered double injustice. The Nahjul Balagha is below the divine word and above the word of man. A treasure in which every topic has a key or solution to every problem, literary, social, intellectual, political, economic, and so on, can be found. The Nahjul Balagha was collected, that is, the collection was done by a Sayyid Razi, who himself was primarily a literary scholar. He was a poet. At the same time, he was a theologian. In other words, he was expert in various areas of Islamic learning. The reason why he collected some of the sermons, letters, and maxims of Imam Ali was, as he says in his introduction to the Nahjul Balagha. First, he planned to write a book entitled Khasa'isul A'imma, the special qualities of the infallible Imams alayhim as-salam. Then he completed the first chapter on Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful. He added some of his sayings at the end of that first chapter. As he says in his introduction, because of some problems and obstacles, he did not succeed in completing the very book. Then some of his friends saw some of the short sayings of Imam Ali at the end of the first chapter. They were struck with wonder. They have become infatuated with those sayings, and that's why they asked Sayyid al-Radhi to collect some of the sermons, letters, and maxims of Imam Ali. In compliance with their own request, he started to collect as he did in order to gain a wide reputation, because he says that by doing this task, it will bring him worldwide or widespread reputation, and he also will be rewarded. So now, whenever we even think about the Nahjul Balagha, as Sayyid Razi, his name is associated with the Nahjul Balagha. In one sense, the Nahjul Balagha itself has made his name eternal. As long as the Nahjul Balagha exists, his name will be always associated with the Nahjul Balagha, and this is one of the ways in which he has become famous, and this is one reward out of many rewards with regard to Sayyid Razi. Sayyid Razi is the younger brother of Sharif Murtaza. Sharif Murtaza was his elder brother, and they were both students of Sheikh al-Mufid, who was really one of the most famous and outstanding Shi'i theologians, as Martin McDermott even wrote his PhD thesis on Sheikh al-Mufid, the theology al-Mufid, which was also translated into Persian. Yeah. The Nahjul Balagha, as I have already said, consists of different topics. So after 1,000 years, some of the scholars decided to find the sources of the sermons, letters, and the maxims of Imam Ali. Because, technically speaking, of course, I am just giving a gist and proceed on my own paper. The Nahjul Balagha, technically speaking, is based on the Mursal Hadith. There is a difference between Al-Hadith al-Mursal and Al-Hadith al-Musnad. It means that Sayyid Razi did not mention the chains of transmission. He just quoted the sermons, letters, and maxims directly from Imam Ali. One of the Iraqi scholars wrote a 4-volume book entitled Masadiru Nahjul Balagha wa Asaniduhu. The book is available, it's my briefcase now. As-Sayyid Abdul Reza al-Husseini al-Khatib. He collected all the documents of all the sermons, sayings, and maxims of Imam Ali. Of course, some of the sermons had been mentioned before Sayyid Razi collected them at the same time. And because of the significance and importance of the Nahjul Balagha with regard to its own content, some of the scholars started to write their own commentaries upon the Nahjul Balagha. It should be known that Nahjul Balagha is also a literary book. That is why anyone wishing to become profoundly familiar with Arab literature, there are 4 books which should be studied unavoidably. The first one is the Quran. The second one, the Nahjul Balagha, the path to eloquence. And the third one, Kitab al-Bayan wa Tabeen by Al-Jahiz. And the fourth one, Al-Kamil lil-Mubarraz. But the Nahjul Balagha stands out, even as a literary book. And Sayyid Rizvi himself had a high poetic taste. That is why he tried to collect those sermons, letters or maxims which stand out from the literary point of view. But it should be known that he was not just a literary scholar, he was a scholar. And his versatility is unquestionable and undoubtable. All right, let's return to the main point. As I said, some of the scholars, because of the importance of it, wrote some lengthy commentaries upon the Nahjul Balagha in Arabic. The first one, which I would like to refer to, is the Sharh or commentary as written by Ibn Abil Hadi, who himself was a Shafi'ite Mu'tazilite. I don't have time to say anything about Mu'tazilism, but he was a follower of Al-Jahiz, whose risala entitled Fazilatul Mu'tazila, the excellence of the Mu'tazila, is now lost. Ibn Abil Hadi completed his own commentary within 4 years and 8 months, as he says. He wrote his multi-volume commentary in 20 volumes. He wrote a 20-volume commentary. Of course, his commentary possesses such merits, from the literary, social, historical, and theological points of view. But he sometimes goes to extremes. Sometimes he goes into deep literary details, and sometimes into deep historical discussions. But his commentary is really one of the very, very famous and good and recommendable commentaries, apart from its shortcomings. However, apart from his doctrinal prejudice, his commentary is a very good commentary. However, his commentary has been criticized by some scholars. For example, a book called Al-Iqdun Nadhib is a book that's written about his commentary. It is a critique of his own commentary. Salasil al-Hadid fi Taghyid Ibn Abil Hadi, and some others. The other commentary which I would like to refer to is the commentary as written by Sheikh Sayyid Abul Hassan al-Khoi, which is really one of the most famous commentaries as written by this very learned man. His projected work, or he planned to write 21 volumes, but after having completed 60 volumes, he died. And the whole project was completed by Hassan Zada al-Amuli and Muhammad Baqir al-Kamari. What Sayyid Hamul Hassan al-Khoi does with regard to his commentary is that, of course, he devotes about 200 pages. Of course, I have seen all the commentaries, and this is what I am saying is based on my investigation in these commentaries. He devotes about 200 pages about some of the literary points and topics. After that, he goes on to deal with Imam Ali, to speak about Imam Ali, about his faza'il, merits and virtues, about his name, agnomens or kuna, nicknames, and alghab or titles. Then, his method is such that first he numbers all the khutab or sermons, and he divides each sermon into various sections, and then he explains some of the keywords as contained within each section of the khutbah or sermon. He gives his a grammatical explanation, and then he comments upon that very section. And what is interesting is that he translates each khutbah into Persian. And then we compare his own Persian translation with some others as done later on and later on. I like his own translation much better than some others. Why? Because even his own Persian translation is indicative of his own full or better understanding of the Nahjul Balagha because of his proficiency in Arabic, which is really a very beautiful language. Of course, in the book Masadir Nahjul Balagha wa Asaniduhu, As-Sayyid Abdul Raza al-Husayni al-Khatib says why he decided to write this commentary. Of course, he wanted to write this commentary because of the importance of the Nahjul Balagha. But there is another reason which seems to be a personal purpose. Anyway, his main purpose was to introduce Nahjul Balagha to the Muslims, or in what I say, to the world at large. The other commentary which I would like to refer to is that as written by Ibn Maytham al-Bahrani. He was a prolific writer. For example, one of his books called An-Najatu fi al-Qiyamah fi Tahrir Amr al-Imamah. The book is available. He was a student of Nasiruddin al-Tusi. You may all know Nasiruddin al-Tusi himself was a philosopher, especially his commentary upon Al-Isharat wa Tanbiyat Ibn Sina is very famous. He was also a theologian, Tajreed al-I'tiqad, as commented upon by Allama Aghili, and I myself translated Al-Maqsad al-Khamis fil Imam from this book from English into Arabic, which will be published, and my translation will be published very soon. I have worked on the translation a lot. What is interesting is that there was a mutual teacher-student relation between al-Bahrani and Nasiruddin al-Tusi. He studied philosophy, or kalam, mostly theology and even philosophy, I think so, but kalam, definitely, with Nasiruddin al-Tusi, and Nasiruddin al-Tusi studied jurisprudence with him. His proficiency in jurisprudence or al-fiqh was like that of Nasiruddin al-Tusi in philosophy. But Nasiruddin al-Tusi was really a genius, an astronomer, mathematician, and so on. He was a versatile scholar at the same time. His method of commentary or commenting upon the Nahjul Balagha is that he also divides each sermon into various sections, and then he explains the keywords, and he also gives a grammatical explanation of each section, and finally he comments upon it. Of course, he also refers to some of the preceding. He also refers to some of the preceding commentaries, like the commentary by Al-Rawandi and some others. But some criticisms have also been leveled at his own commentary, because he insufficiently draws upon the Shi'i traditions, and he heavily draws upon the non-Shi'i traditions as well. And some criticisms have also been leveled at his lexical explanations. Apart from some of the shortcomings, his own commentary seems to be a very good and useful commentary, but all these commentaries, as you know, have been written in Arabic. And only those who are familiar with Arabic can benefit from these monumental commentaries. The other one which I would like to mention is في ظلال نهج البلاغة, as written by Muhammad Jawad al-Maghniya, sorry, not al-Mughniya, al-Maghniya, the correct pronunciation is al-Maghniya, who was a Lebanese scholar. Of course, he was proficient in al-fiqh, because his book al-fiqh ala al-mazahib al-khamsa is very famous. Jurisprudence according to 5 schools of thought, which was also translated into English by Ali Wali al-Barahi as well. So he was a jurist, faqih, theologian, and a philosopher. في ظلال نهج البلاغة is a very good and recommendable commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha. Of course, he left behind 3 encyclopedic works of his. One is his Tafsir al-Kashf upon the Quran, Fiqh Imam al-Sadiq is another one, and the third one is his commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha. What he does is that most of these commentators follow the same traditional method. I mean the traditional order of commenting upon the Nahjul Balagha. I think one might have been influenced by the other, but I can't say definitely if such a method is really a good one, but I will give my own personal view at about the end of my own lecture. Of course, I don't have time enough to go into detail. That is why I tried to delete most of the points I've discussed in detail in my paper. Anyway, what he does is that he divides each khutbah into various sections, and first he explains some of the keywords, and then he gives a grammatical explanation of each section, and finally he comments upon that very section. As he says in his introduction, his motive or objective to write this commentary was to show that the Nahjul Balagha is a book based on which there can be established a harmonization or reconciliation between this worldly life and the other worldly life. Nahjul Balagha is a book for dunya, for this world and hereafter. Following this book, we can sort out the problem between this world and the next, because according to the Nahjul Balagha, the next world is the end or goal. And this world is just a means to arriving at eternal felicity. This is what he says. That is why he wrote a commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha in order to help the readers how to arrive or how to attain double felicity. So I think one of the merits or characteristics of his own commentary is that quite simple. He explains and he deals with the Nahjul Balagha with regard to the sermons, letters, and maxims lucidly, simply, and understandably. And that's very important. Definitely. The other commentaries mentioned by me are of an academic nature. But what's more important is the writer of a commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha should consider not only the elite, but the common people, the layman. If a commentary is of no use or benefit to the layman, but just it can be of use to the elite and the educated or the academics, so Nahjul Balagha cannot be fully useful. The other commentary which I would like to refer to is the one as written by Nasir Makarim, a Shirazi, who is one of the most famous jurisprudence and religious authorities in present-day Iran. Of course, he wrote two encyclopedic commentaries upon the Nahjul Balagha, one of which was written originally in Persian, and the other one in Arabic. The one to which I would like to refer is the one as written in Arabic. Of course, in academic Arabic, very beautifully, especially the introduction was written so beautifully from the literary point of view, in such a way that the reader feels intoxicated while reading that introduction. Very beautifully, with very, very beautiful Arabic words and terms. Do you know that one of the characteristics of the Arabic language is that I don't think there may be any other language whose vocabulary might outnumber that of the Arabic language, because for everything there are lots of words. I think the Arabs are more and more interested in creating as many words as possible. Yeah. So even if, for example, we study Arabic for 100 years, just an example, still we feel that there are so many other words which we have not come across yet. Arabic. Anyway, Nasir Makarim's title is Nafahatul Bilaya, Sharhun Asriyun Jami'un li Nahjul Balagha. Nafahatul Bilaya, the outbreathings of sanctity, a comprehensive mother, which might cause some misconception, a comprehensive new commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha, of course, following the Arabic grammar, upon the Nahjul Balagha. First of all, he wrote a long introduction in which he says that the Nahjul Balagha is an inexhaustible web which can never be fathomed and exhausted. Then he also followed the same traditional method. Of course, he gives a lot of informative notes on the chains of transmission of each khutbah. He refers to some of the relevant Quranic verses and traditions. He explains the keywords in each section. He also gives a grammatical explanation of some of the words or ibarat or phrases or sentences, and finally he comments upon that very section, and he also draws some conclusions from each section. Of course, one of the characteristics of the commentary of Nahjul Balagha by Nasir Makarim al-Shirazi is that he also points to some of the issues some of the contemporary issues or challenges. And that's very nice. For example, that's very important. Some of the modern or 20th century challenges are solved as well. The other one, which I would like to refer to, is the commentary upon Nahjul Balagha by Muhammad Abdo, who is very famous. He was, the former Mufti of Egypt. He was of Egyptian origin. What he does is that he, apart from having edited the Nahjul Balagha, what he does is just he gives, he explains just some of the words, some of the keywords or some of the unfamiliar words. That's all. He does nothing. But he wrote a very beautiful introduction. He said that first, I was unfamiliar with the Nahjul Balagha. He says, I knew nothing about the Nahjul Balagha. But when I came to be familiar with this book, then I discovered its importance. Then he became interested in writing a commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha, but as I have already said, what he does is that he explains some of the keywords. That's all. And the other one is the Nahjul Balagha as edited, annotated, and indexed by Dr. Sohi As-Saleh. You might have seen, the Nahjul Balagha as edited by Dr. Sohi As-Saleh. What he does is that he explains some of the keywords, and he, of course, prepared some indexes. Faharis. 5 minutes left. I'm still in the beginning. What shall I do? Anyway, all right. Okay. What I can do, I thought that 40 minutes, right? Apologies.
Time flies when you're having fun.
What I can do is just to, all right. So, anyway, but what's my own suggestion in this regard is that all the commentaries, as referred to by me, as mentioned by me, are the commentaries which were written based on the traditional method or order of commenting upon the Nahjul Balagha. But what is lacking today is the lack of a comprehensive topical commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha. Such scholars like Labi Bayti, Tasnifu Nahjul Balagha. He is a Syrian scholar, really very, very nice, very exquisite, and very informative. He wrote a book on the classification of the topics of the Nahjul Balagha. First, he divides the topics of the Nahjul Balagha into 10 parts, and then he subdivides each part into some chapters or fusul, and then he further subdivides each fasl into many sub-topics or specific topics. His book is really a framework based on which a comprehensive topical commentary upon the Nahjul Balagha can be written. The commentaries, as mentioned by me, can be likened, for example, to, each of them can be likened to an ocean in which a diver is desperately looking for a pearl, which can make a chain to world management. Nahjul Balagha is a book which can create global awakening.
MashaAllah.
Spiritually, socially, politically, economically, and so on. It is because of the multi-dimensional or multifaceted of the nature of this work. I think time is over, right? So I should acknowledge that, of course, I haven't done full justice to my own paper. Apologies for any shortcomings. At the same time, I wish to extend my thanks to you for your patience and attentive listening. Jazakumullah khaira. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.